would you give up sim racing for real racing? Jimmy!
I'm Jimmy Broadbent. I'm part of the Bilstein racing team.
Hopefully going to be pole for us.
I want to be a racing driver forever. That's like my dream as a kid.
You were on track with Franz Hermann. You must have been the richest person living in a shed. Do you think you fell into some of these opportunities?
Life up until then was difficult. My father, we left him when I was about 7. He was a pretty severe alcoholic. My father ended up taking his own life. That was basically my entire life up until I was about 16, 17 years old, being like pushed around, beaten up, degraded, all this stuff.
Because of those traumatic experiences as a teen, is it quite hard not to kind of think about that when you go into like a dark place? Jimmy!
Hello.
When any of us climb into a sim, there is this tiny part of us that thinks, I wonder if one day this could lead to me being a racing driver. You are a real life version of one of those inspiring cases where that is actually true. You're also one of the very few people in the world that can say they have overtaken Max Verstappen and also shared a real life track with him at the Nürburgring. And it all began from a garden shed and some heartbreaking circumstance. But Jimmy, in your own words, who are you and what do you do?
Oh, bloody hell. Yeah, I'm Jimmy Broadbent, and I guess you summed it up fairly well there. I mean, I'm a content creator, YouTuber, influencer. I don't like the word influencer. It sounds like you're kind of, like Palpatine in Star Wars. You're influencing, anyway, it's bad. I don't like it. But yeah, I've been doing that now full time since 2016, and sort of in the last few years, I've now moved more into like presenting. So I do presenting for Gran Turismo. I, as you say, race real cars, part of the Bilstein racing team, and a couple other bits on the side as well. And also now a father. So yeah, I think the last one's probably the most important one, but that's about all of it, I think.
It really does feel like this whole journey is a great big tree, because we're now at the top of that tree where it's getting wider and there's more branches and different arms to what you do growing out of it. But it all started from a seed, from a root. And to me, the moment that I picked out would have been the first time you must have stepped into a sim. Do you remember that?
It's kind of difficult because the first time I ever had like a steering wheel on a desk. Actually, no, it wasn't a steering wheel on a desk. It was a steering wheel at the end of my bed when I was about 5 years old. Remember those old like Mad Catz wheels with the flat bottom on, and like they're awful. But I thought, oh my god, I've got a steering wheel. I can drive this game. And it was Formula 1 97 was the game, to put an age on myself there. And I remember it actually broke. The wheel broke straight away. I never got to use it. So I just sat at the end of my bed and pretended my bed was a race car and then drove it around. So not quite the best sim. But then it took a long time for me after that to then actually have my own sim rig. I'd go to like arcades and play like the Daytona machines and think like, this is badass. I love this. And I remember saying to myself, I'm going to have one of these in my room when I'm older. And yeah, little do I know that would be the case. But my first dedicated sim rig was probably like 2012. So it took a long time to actually make that thing happen.
Which coincidentally was the first year you ever uploaded a YouTube video.
Yes. I remember that one. It was, what was it? It was 886. Because I was obsessed with, there's a show called Best Motoring. And it's basically Japanese lads smashing tuner cars down mountain road. And I'm like, yeah, this is great. I want to do that as well. So I found a mod. I found a really bad version of Scuba and drove it around. And the video itself, I look back at it now, I'm just like, oh, Jesus Christ. Like, made in Windows Movie Maker with like the star wipes and stuff going on. I must have thought at the time, this is generational.
I've absolutely smashed this.
Yeah, I've done this. I look back at it now and I think, oh, God. Well, it's kind of cute to look back at now, but...
Well, one of my questions was going to be, like, do you remember how long it took you to reach 100,000 subscribers? Did you ever think you were going to get there? It was going to be a bit further down, but did that guy at the time think, I've absolutely nailed this?
No, at the time, I just wanted to share a video with my friends, because I thought, this is a really cool hobby. I want to share this to the people that are into it. But what I didn't realize at the time is not everyone felt as strongly as I did about fake racing cars around the circuit, or even racing cars at all. And in 2012, I didn't really upload videos to be a YouTuber. I uploaded it because I thought it'd be cool to show people. But that whole sort of career side didn't really kick off for a few more years after that.
But to get the context into who then began that career, I want to understand what you were like in those kind of earliest years. Who was those earliest years, Jimmy? Like, what did your week look like from a perspective of going to school? Was school like the second part of coming home and then racing?
So, I mean, in 2012, I mean, I was past school at this point. I was working at an insurance company, one around this area of the world, very famous for an annoying advert. And I worked there, and I finally had the money to have hobbies. Like I come from a fairly modest background, and I didn't really have money to do anything other than go out and maybe see friends, and that's about it. So now I had a job. I'm like, cool. I'm now gonna indulge in this hobby, in this thing that I want, and try and set up myself up a little sim rig and go from there. And I would work all day at this awful job. And
You were about 20 years old at the time, right?
yeah, about 20 years old, yeah, ish. And I hated the job, but it meant I can come home and then fuck about on the sim rig in the evening. I was like, yeah, I love that. And I spent all my evenings doing that. I stay up to like 3, 4 in the morning, then go to work at 9 o'clock. And then I just do that on my own with no output, just the pure enjoyment of the hobby.
Were you like a pure gamer kid growing up in your teenage years?
Yeah, 100%. I was that guy. I used to be really into like old Japanese RPGs, like Final Fantasy, stuff like that. I would just sit at home and play through this 50-hour game over and over and over again. I used to love that stuff. Definitely very introverted as a person back then. Very quiet, very bad socially, and it was a nice way to escape those things.
I meet so many people that do YouTube now that sit in this van that have some of the best success stories that were all introverts. And it's amazing how at some point it's like a spot that bursts. It's just like there's so much personality that's been repressed and repressed and repressed for years. And then boom, the Jimmy Broadbent that we know that comes out, that rage quits, that knows everything.
Exactly.
All of those moments of pure personality. When for you did you start to get a little bit more confident, maybe come out of your shell a bit?
I don't really know. I mean, I'd say probably around 2016, around there, sort of 2017, where like I was sort of coming through a difficult part of my life and realizing that streaming for me wasn't just like turning on the thing and shouting at the camera. It was a way to interact with people and share the thing we're doing. And I always say that streaming for me is like you're sitting down with a group of mates, albeit quite a rowdy group of mates, and you're all just discussing something, and you're the guy that's speaking at that time. And that's kind of how it feels. And in those moments, you have a chance to, I don't know, inject your personality. I like to have a laugh at people. I like to be a bit stupid. So I do that, and people respond to it. And it's always nice because my entire life up until then, I was not treated very well by Eka, like showing that personality. So finally, I'm like, oh, I can be this guy. I can be the person I want to be. And it took a long time. Even now, I still struggle with things, and I'm still trying to like break through into who I know I want to be. But I also have to, always have in the back of my mind, defeat this like little demons. Like, no, you can't do that because people will think a weird thing about you. But
it's like going into a sim room is like going into a virtual pub. Because like you're all there with your mates. There's like a can of whatever you want always down to the right of you, whether it's coffee in the morning or Monster in the afternoon or Holy. There's always something around to drink. There is loads of you all talking absolute garbage half the time, but it's a way of feeling comfortable where some people don't like that kind of world in the outside world, and it makes you feel more comfortable when you kind of escape to it virtually, but it's still just as social.
Yeah.
Why did you have such a tough time in your earliest years?
So basically at the time, like I was at university, and I was at the time with someone, and throughout, I mean, I'll get to the other bits in a minute, but at that point in my life, I was very like, cool, I've got a plan. Someone likes me. I can like get a job. I can have a family, all this stuff. I was very young and quite naive to the world then. And something that ended out of nowhere. And I found myself being in a bit of like a spiral, really, and didn't deal with it well at all. And unfortunately, there've been a lot of other quite significant moments in my life before that. And I just had a handle on it for the majority. And then that sort of just pushed me over the edge. And everything that happened from being young to being then, and then this on top of it, I don't really know how to describe it other than just having a kind of a mental breakdown, I suppose, or like a something changed in my mind. I became a different person. Like I became who I am now, and that person before is dead. It's yeah, it was a very strange period adjusting to this what felt like a new personality.
Obviously, at the time, it must have been hell,
Yeah,
hellish, and many people, listeners, viewers right now, will either be going through that, have gone that, or have got that to come, and it can feel horrific
Mm.
when you're at the bottom of those spirals. But all along this journey, it feels like you've had those really hard moments and always found a way that it picks back up again, and like life does get better. In your earliest years, did you pick up some of the hardships that come along the way? What was it like hitting that first 100,000 subscribers, being able to tell your mum that you've actually got a career as being a YouTuber and kind of get you on that next kick?
no, it was nice because up until then I hadn't really achieved anything, you know, in my own mind anyway. I just sort of I suffered with illness and then couldn't do anything, and you feel a bit useless in that scenario. And as YouTube kept going, as things kept expanding, you know, as you say, I can go to my mum and say, "Look, I've got this plaque that says that I've got these people following me now." And she's, "Oh, nice plaque. That's nice, James. I like that." You know, and my mum, bless her, like she does appreciate what I do, but doesn't understand it really. So she'd be like, "Oh, are you all James's friends? Are you?" It's like, thank you, mum. I'm 30 years old. Like, you know, um, but you know, she's always been very supportive of what I do, and hitting hitting the 100K. You know, to be honest, when I started doing things, hitting 1,000 was my goal. And I thought, if I hit 1,000, I've done it. And then it became 10,000. I thought, bloody 10,000 is a lot, and I remember that very well. And then hitting 100,000, yeah, I was just at that point. I was like, cool, that is the biggest milestone I'm ever gonna hit, and that puts me in like the top 1% of YouTubers or something like that. And I'm very happy with that. And I don't want any more. I don't need any more. But as these things go, it just sort of snowballs and kept going. Well, guys, Ben has held me hostage. And in this time, I must say for my release, I must say to you, please subscribe to Road to Success. Otherwise, this will be the last time you see me.
I must ask, because there's so many people out there that begin their YouTube journeys. I remember when we first hit 1,000 subscribers on this channel, I actually got a little plaque made for ourselves because I was so proud of it. And I thought if we never hit the next goals, I've always got this because we hit that 1,000 subs. I feel like hitting that first 1,000 or 10,000 is almost takes the same effort as it does to get to that first 100K. Would you agree?
I think so. I think it's so tough to start a channel nowadays with something that's like unique and interesting and not just it's like there's a lot of like what I call in my head fast food content where like you don't really watch for the person in it. You watch for like the stupid clickbaity thing they're doing, and you could replace that person in that video with literally anyone, and it would just be the same content. Oh yeah, cool, he's done that. And I think those channels you can actually gain followings quite quickly. But then let's say the person in that video is like, oh, I want to do something that's important to me now. No one will watch. No one cares because they don't care about the person in the video. And for me, I don't go out with like the express intent of like, oh, I'm gonna make these people care about what I do. I just do things that I find interesting personally, and I don't tend to step outside of that zone into something I don't know, clickbaity or like relevant or dramery unless I find it interesting. And I think when you do that, the audience you build is a lot different from the fast food audience. You know, you have a community of people who actually care about the things you're doing. And whilst maybe it isn't the quickest way to grow as a channel, I think it's quality over quantity. You know, and that's how I've always tried to grow my channel, at least.
When did the introverted person inside of you learn that it was actually your personality that was your USP?
I still worry about that now. It's in the last few years, I've definitely been kinder to myself. I'm like, yeah, you know what, you've done a good job. You're doing it right. But whereas before, I just thought, oh, anyone could do this. Anyone could jump in and be this random sim YouTuber. I just happened to be the one that did it first. But then I look back and I thought, well, I wasn't the one that did it first. I mean, I'm not sure if your audience really know much about the rich lore of sim racing YouTube, but I mean, we had there was an American guy called Empty Box, and I remember he had about 60,000 subscribers, And he was so funny. He was so grumpy. He just get in the car. He hates the thing. He's like, almost I hate sim racing. And you just drive around complaining about it the entire time.
Sounds like Max Verstappen.
Yeah. Max really seems to like it. I mean, that guy, I got a lot of respect for him, but we'll talk about it a bit later. But I remember passing Empty Box and being like, oh, what? Really? Me? This dingus? But I think the thing that maybe has separated me is I've always just been honest with everything that's going on, either for me or in the race or personally or whatever. And I think people like the transparency. Not that I go, oh, and then you get into this weird thing where you think, oh, do I be more transparent now to get an audience? I'm like, no, I'm just going to keep being me because it's exhausting to be someone else.
When did you start to believe you were actually quite fast? And when do you actually think you were quite fast?
In sim, I don't think I'm quite fast. I think like I'm all right in a sim. I think like I say all right, I mean like top 15% maybe. But then there's such a difference between like the top 15% and like the top 1%. Like I've raced those guys. It's like racing robots. There's no chance that they will not make a mistake. And if they do, it's like, oh, I've lost half a tenth there. I'm like, cool. I just crash on the last lap. And they're all, and again, Max is one of those people, just an absolute robot. But in real, like the thing that was important to me, and I think it's important to a lot of people who do sim racing, is they're all frustrated racing drivers. They don't get the chance to do it in real life. They'll never have a chance to do it because of money or time or some other factor. And it was really important to me when I got into a real car to be fast. I wouldn't have been able to take it because I wanted to be a racing driver forever. That's like my dream as a kid. Well, I wake up, ever since the wheel at the end of the bed, I wanted to be a racing driver. And then it was like, I want to be a Formula 1 driver. Can't do that. I want to be a touring car driver. I can't do that because there was no budget to go and do these things. To the point with my first actual car race, I think I just turned 30 and I'm 34 now. So only a few years ago. 34 very shortly, I should say. And I wasn't very good in the first race. I was too scared. Like, I remember it's a grid of MX-5s, and those guys, they don't fuck around. Like, they will wipe you out if you're on the line. And when you're driving the car and you're responsible for any damage to the car, you sort of, oh, okay, all right, I'm sorry. But then you realize it's kind of like, it's kind of like racing in general. If you start to like drive under the limit on purpose to conserve something, you make a lot more mistakes than you do actually driving at the limit because it's much more predictable. So as time went on, I've got faster and faster. And I think, I've had a couple of drives where I thought, yeah, actually, you know what? You're a racing driver. You can do that. Like driving, for example, we drove at the Silverstone Festival last year with Alex Brundle and his Mustang. I teamed up with Jan Mardenborough, who's another sort of sim to real life success story. And we were the fastest Mustang. I overtook a guy around the outside at the first corner on a GP circuit in a Mustang. I don't know how that worked. And I thought, I remember doing it and thinking, like, this is a terrible idea, Jimmy. What are you doing? What are you doing? And then, like, it works. I'm like, I'm a hero. Like, and then those moments where you make the difference as a driver, they are really, they're really important. I mean, another one for me was when we raced in Germany the last few years alongside Misha and Steve, and the last couple of years, Manuel Metzger as well. Great guy. But our first year at a Nürburgring, you have to have a permit to race. And there are two permits there, the gold and silver. And the silver permit means you can race there, but you can only race up to a certain power to weight. And for us, the maximum power to weight was basically a BMW 330i, kind of standard commuter car, but then slammed and put on slicks. And yeah, awesome car to drive. And we started a race. I started in P5. And by the end of the second lap, I was in P1. I overtook everyone, all these like really experienced people, including actually I overtook Jack Aitken, who was there doing his permit as well. I remember getting out of the car, and I've never been more pumped in my life. Like, I did that. And I watched the stint back now, and I go, this looks like a competent racing driver. And it's really hard sometimes to allow yourself to go, like, yeah, you did that.
That's actually me.
Give yourself that win instead of being like, oh, well, no, someone else could have done better. Yeah, sure they could have done, but they didn't. I did. So you need to give yourself that win sometimes.
So a lot of your self-confidence has obviously been built through actually getting out and doing things you never thought possible. When you look back at your journey, do you think you fell into some of these opportunities, or have you now got the confidence to say that you created those opportunities?
I think it's a mixture of both. I mean, I wouldn't have been on the radar had I not had a YouTube channel. And I mean, my first years doing proper racing with Praga. I mean, talk about from nothing to a bloody prototype straight
Yeah,
away.
that's cool.
And but then having to explain to your audience, like, listen, this is tough. Like, I've not driven anything like this before. And when they expect you to be fast, yeah, straight away they expect, like, yeah, but I could have done better than that. It's like, yeah, maybe you could have done, but when you're in this car that's worth 100k, and you think to yourself, well, if I get it wrong and put it in the wall,
So that's
I'm done.
when it would be a really good time to kind of ask, because we've kind of covered off that first start of being in actual racing cars from the sim. That transition period, was there stuff that you thought would be one way or another about actual racing, or the way it would feel, all the rest of it, that is completely polar opposite to a sim? And is there stuff that's actually closer than in a sim that you thought, oh, that's actually more realistic than I thought it would be from a sim world?
It's an interesting question. I mean, the first thing I always say, and people say, "Oh, what's the difference between this and this? What was the thing you found challenging?"
Death.
Yeah, exactly. That is, I mean, I hate to say it because every time someone says this to me, I just lose some brain cells. Like, "Oh, Jimmy, you can't reset in real life." I'm like, "Oh, can you not? Oh, Jesus, I never considered that. Wow, of course I fucking can't." Like, I'm aware of that, acutely aware of that. But small rages aside, like, for me, all my experience, everything until I was about 30 years old was a simulator. Everything. I had no context of what a real car was like. And I remember getting in the Praga for the first time and turning it on, and you're like, it vibrates and it rumbles and it smells. You're like, oh my God. And you're just overwhelmed, your senses overwhelmed by everything that's happening. And it took for me about a year and a bit to get up to what I consider an okay pace. And that was because in that time, I didn't believe in myself and that I could do the things that I was doing. So, like, as time went on, I started to unlock this sim experience that I've had for many years and go, oh, wait, I can use that here. I can use that here. But at the start, I was completely overwhelmed by fear and just sensations and everything else. Now that, like, I'm settled and, like, I feel like at home in driving cars, I think sim racing at a high level is harder than a decent level in racing, for sure. Like, I think I would say the top sim racers have a similar sort of ability for what they're doing than, like, F1 drivers do in there. Like, it's so close. I mean, there was recently an N24 event, and the top, I think that all the GT3 cars are separated by 2 seconds around the entire Nürburgring circuit, the entire thing. 2 seconds. That's so close.
So the mistakes that are being made are just almost nil.
Yeah, exactly. And if you make a mistake, you go wide, bam, you're 20th. And that's over like an 8.5-minute lap.
Yeah, I've seen this, and Louis, who's with me today, is just like, he blows my mind on a sim, and I noticed it when he beat. I hate to say it because I know you're listening, and I know it was at podium place on simulators you're not used to. Misha,
Mate, he'll always have excuses for that.
Ben Collins, and it's like when I watch him, I'm like, and then have a go and jump in the seat. I'm like, where did you find that? Like, for me, it's like, where did you find that second? But for, like, even people at the time, it must get to the point where you're like looking for those 0.1s, those points of tenths, as you were saying before, and they're just on it. They just don't drop it.
And it's just everywhere. Like, that is the depressing thing. It's everywhere. They find that time. You know, it's just rolling a couple more Ks into a corner, maybe just being a little bit less aggressive on a brake pedal or coming off it a bit quicker and stuff like that. And that's all through thousands of laps of experience. Because, like, that's something else. A big difference between real life racing and sim racing is that, for example, I did this Mustang event recently where I partnered up with Matt Neal with Brundle Motorsport. And my first practice session of a circuit I've not driven before, which is Brands GP, was qualifying. There you go. There's your practice. And you have to find your pace in like 2 laps. And you have to do that straight away. In these sim events, as I'm sure Louis knows, you can just put thousands of laps in and infinite practice time versus deal with it. And sometimes it's deal with it with a car that the brakes aren't set in properly, or maybe there's like a problem with differential. It's raining or stuff like that, and you just have to deal with it. And that is the big difference.
So it wasn't even unlocking skill, it was like unlocking each little mental strength box was the actual thing that made you fast on a racetrack, because all the things of knowing how to be fast were there anyway, it seems.
I'd say so. And I think the biggest thing that helped me in sim was the variety of stuff that I do in sim. Like, I drive so many weird and wonderful cars. Like, I drive historics, I drive modern prototypes, F1 cars, old F1 cars, road cars, whatever. I love it all. I mean, give me a wheelbarrow and I'll drive that shit. I love it. And having that adaptability, I think, is the best thing a racing driver can have. Be adaptable to any situation. Because if everything's perfect, then you'll be a sim racer. But it's not perfect, and you have to have the ability to feel those nuances and understand how to react to them properly. And it's something that I hate to say, you can't teach it. You have to experience it. And it's taken me years to get to the point now where I'm still a long way behind a lot of other drivers, but I can see where that time is now. I can see where those little moments are.
Well, it brings me on nicely to someone that I actually think has done more real laps in life around a circuit than on a simulator, which is Misha on the Nürburgring. How did you come to meet Misha? Because I remember the first time I ever saw you properly was in that Bilstein car. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's gone from a sim to like in a race car. That was that moment for me. So like, how did that come about?
I mean, when did I first meet Misha? I think we were always like aware of each other because I always watch his videos because I love the Nürburgring, as a lot of people do, and he is the guy there. So I watch a lot of his videos, and I knew that I was going to be racing at the ring. Well, I was meant to be racing at the ring with somebody else, a sim brand who basically taught a good game, then did nothing. Kind of how they're doing in real life now, to be honest. But then I messaged him like, "Hey Misha, like, what do I do in the wet around here?" Because I was really scared of the wet of the ring, because the wet of the Nürburgring is a different ball game to the wet at a normal circuit.
I have experienced it once.
Yeah, exactly. Because one the circuit is long, so it could be soaking wet at one corner and completely dry somewhere else. So you come charging him thinking you're the fucking king of the world. And, oh wait, it's wet. I'm best. and that happens. And also, there's so many different tarmac surfaces that all have different levels of grip, and you don't know what they are until you learn them and experience them. So again, it's like you get thrown into this ball of fire and go, "Well, if you survive, great, do another lap." And it's very spooky. But so I'd asked Misha, like, please help me, give me some sort of insight into this. And he would. He'd share his laps, gave me time. He was very nice like that for someone, again, who hadn't really met him before. And then I did Praga for a couple of years, and I was sort of in between. Was it just at the start of or end of 22? And I was like, oh well, cool. That was some good racing. Really glad I had the chance to do that. But back to normal life now. And I got a phone call from Misha. I think the first phone call I've ever had from him. I was like, oh, hello. He goes, oh yeah, hi Jimmy. Do you want to race at Nürburgring next year? And I was like,
not like how you are, how you doing, how's your business? Just what? Shall we race?
Like, yeah, Misha is. He's straight to the point. And obviously I was like, yep, cool. Let's make this happen. And then it just turns out that he'd had a meeting or something with the guy at Bilstein and just said, oh, let's do a racing team. I know some guys. And he called me first for whatever reason. So I was very, I think because in the sphere of YouTubers and racing drivers, there aren't really many. And if they are, they're kind of 30, 40K subscribers. Not that that's a bad number at all, but like it's 900 is bigger. So he called me, and then we spoke to Steve about it. And then before I know it, I'm at the ring with him and Steve, and we're signing the contract to go racing. So, but Misha, God, I can't say enough good things about him. He's such a kind man, so kind-hearted, like such a good spirit to him. And I think sometimes he's very blunt and very to the point, and people maybe misinterpret that sometimes. But the man himself is one of the nicest people I've ever met. He's a lovely guy.
Yeah, he is willing to help anyone, Misha. Even like when I did my first podcast, I think it was on like 4,000 subscribers. I dropped him a message. Sure, rock up with the van. Nothing else, like, sure, exactly. Ben. Yep, rock up with the van. And that's exactly what we did. When you actually started racing alongside him, because I've admired his videos for years, like one of my favourites, not even from a talent perspective, just from a raw theatre of like, this is what cars are about, was a video of him in a K20 going around the Nürburgring like this Honda. I was just like mesmerised from it. And
he loves that shit. Yeah.
That was the hook like moment for me. But like, what do you, because Misha does push it and he's on the limit. Like, what did you learn from like actually meeting him and racing alongside of him straight away that was like quite profound to you?
I mean, for his point of view, he has such a knowledge of the place, you know. And as I was saying earlier, experience around there is worth an equal amount of time to raw pace. And he just seemed to have this great experience. But I think that the downside to Misha having driven all these cars around there is he's driven road cars around there at like, he pushes it, but he doesn't go 10 temps. You can see it, like, it's always holding back a little bit. And in racing, where I think actually I had a similar amount of experience racing to him, if not maybe more, not at the ring, but in general, that it's different. You have to push the thing as hard as possible, live it on the limit, live it sliding around, and like the 330i for the first year, which he would say he struggled a little bit in. It's a car you have to live in always in the slip because that's how it goes fast. He didn't like that. He was so used to these road cars that tend to be sort of locked into like a understeer moment. Not that he can't control those things. He's very decent driver, Misha, but I just think that the idea of going straight to a race car where you have to just effectively beat the shit out of it and not care about it, it's different from driving someone's road car and holding back.
Having that mentality of I actually do need to hold back
yeah,
that little bit.
Keep it alive. And oh God, who prepared this? Like, do the brakes work? I will never be able to drive the way Misha drives in TF because I think he gets in and turns a bit of his brain off that goes, cool, this could be like, this car could have not been prepared properly and just sends it. And then he goes, oh, okay, that feels rubbish. I'm stopping now. I can never do that. TF for me is a battleground.
Is that like a risk factor?
Maybe it is, yeah. I mean, because I've obviously taken a different route. I've gone straight to like racing there. I've done like maybe 5 or 6 TF laps and over 300 race laps, so it's a completely different mentality. Because I know when I go out on the circuit, if I come up on someone who's going slow, they're probably going to see me and get out of my way. In TF, you go around the circuit and the guy's busy on his phone taking a selfie or something in the car, and he could just not paying attention to the fact he's got his car flying up behind him, and it's just completely different.
You were a good passenger.
No.
I didn't think you would be.
Terrible passenger. In fact, again, one of the first things we did as our little race team is Misha took us all around, and I'm just like fighting for my life in that passenger seat. Man. I'm like, stop it. It was terrible. But same thing with Steve as well, because Steve took us for a passenger lap, and he didn't know where he was going, so he sent it into a corner far too quick. I'm like, Steve, slow down. We're not going to make this.
That's the thing, because all of those laps, you've always been in control. So like letting go of a little bit of control sometimes can be difficult. With Misha and that team, what was your kind of favourite moment at the ring and in the racing?
You know what? It was kind of end of our first year in the 330i, and we had been fighting to try and get on the podium for the entire time we were there. We had 5th and 4th, and we just lots of little things went wrong for us, which meant that we didn't quite get the place we deserved. And then I was in the car for the last stint. I think I was in the car for 2 hours. It was like 1-1-2 the way it worked out, and I was chasing down 3rd place. I could see him, and I was catching him, getting closer. And the car was starting to feel a little bit like weird. Didn't know why, but I was like, okay, something's odd, but I'm going to keep pushing anyway. To the point where I was coming out of the corner, just do this randomly. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, just keep going. And I caught 3rd. And whilst I was passing 3rd, he was passing another lapped car, which then he had contact with. The car then went in front of us, and I had to avoid this guy having a crash and then navigate that. And after this poor lapped car was in the wall behind us, it was just me and this other guy, like, side by side, coming up to a corner. I remember looking at him and being like, on the gas, like, fuck, go. And I got by him and pulled away, and we got the 3rd place, which was amazing. And I got out of the car, and I was exhausted because we had no AC in those cars, kind of like in here, actually. And it was about 60C in the car, something like that, 65C. I'm in there for 2 hours, so you're just completely exhausted at the end. I like drag myself out of the car, and I hear like just from over the way, like, "Come here, you motherfucker!" And it's Misha being like just so pumped. And I ran over to him and like jumped to this huge hug after the race. And he's having such a great time. And it was such an emotional moment because we'd all pushed to do that. And it's a big deal for us to have that moment. But it turned out that I had a puncture, a rear left puncture, and basically on the last lap, where it was feeling weird, and I took the guy, it was in the single digits in PSI, which should be about 20, 28, somewhere around there. That's why the car was handling weird.
Are you so full of adrenaline that, like, even though racing drivers and when you're all suited and booted, you can look and go, yeah, you look mean, you look like sick, bro. inside the helmet, inside the suit, going into that corner, are you still the Jimmy that looks right and goes, fuck it? like there's almost a degree of if it goes wrong, it goes wrong. I just have to brake late here. What internal force is driving that?
You know
from
what?
someone that come from such an introverted background that would apologise to everyone. You're going to not apologise to that guy and go, this is my corner.
No, I think something happens when the helmet goes on, you know. It's almost like, so I'm someone that gets quite easily overstimulated. Like I'll wear like headphones in public a lot, you know, 'cause it's quite noisy. But so having my headphones in, my helmet on, I can't hear anyone else. It's just me in there. And it doesn't, the sort of the playful personality goes and is replaced by, I can only describe him as like a competitor. And if there is a gap to be had, if there's a move to be made, I'm taking it. It's mine. Like, I don't care about anyone else's race on the circuit. Like on that circuit, I'm the most selfish man there is. Like I'm taking every chance, taking every opportunity, and if there's any advantage to be had, I'll have it. And the helmet comes off, and I'm like, oh, that was all right, wasn't it? Is he okay? You know, but in that moment, you can't do that. Otherwise, you can't. You need to be. A competitor in that moment. You can't be anything else.
I need everyone listening, watching, and yourself to capture in their head a screen grab of what they see as you in that moment, looking right at that guy, breaking into that corner with a low tyre pressure, about to overtake on that circuit. I need you to put that to one side of your head and then get another screen grab of what they see as the shed where it all started at the bottom of the garden. And your mum, did she ever come to any of the races?
Yeah, she did. She came to a couple of them. She came to ones that turned out to be like really good races. She's really happy to me. So she came to my first ever win in 21. She was there for that. Very emotional moment. And she came to when we won the championship.
You think that was
in 22.
fate?
I don't really believe in fate. You know, I think that I think you have control of the things around you. You know, and I think it was a good race from us. You know, we drove well, and maybe I drove better because I knew I had people there. Or
correlation, do you think, between your mum turning?
Well, she's coming to the 24 this year, so I hope there is. Because
is Betfair open?
Yeah. No, I don't know. I mean, I think you always try and perform better for people around you, but you know, I've always taken for every race I go to at the ring, I always take my partner Annie, and now I take Guy, our son, with us to every race, and I don't think it really affects much. It's more just like having a nice, stable environment outside of the car. So when you get in the car, you can really focus on those things. But no, I mean, having my mum there and my family, it's very important to me. Like one of my fantasies when I was like, had no chance of getting into racing, I was like, oh, I really wish I could be on a podium one day and have my family there to like cheer me on and support me. And like, I have like this flashbulb memory moment of lifting the trophy for the championship. I'm like, looking at my mum and be like, this is it. You're in that moment. You've made it happen, and that's a very nice memory for me. And I've got a picture actually of that podium because for that as well, all my friends from online who I raced with for years, who we're all similarly kind of like a bit introverted, a bit socially maybe not quite as developed as we could be in a kind way, but they all came over. I mean, one of them even came from Lithuania to my good friend Coin to be there, and there's a picture of me and my teammate and all my friends on the podium at Donington with the trophy. Like this is it. This is what we can do if we had the chance to do it.
Does it ever make you feel that it is actually quite important work for the other kids that are stuck in a shed after horrific circumstances somewhere across the country, feeling quite lonely? That you do actually stand for being quite an idol to those guys?
I don't know. I don't like to think like that because I feel like that's
because it puts pressure on you.
No, because I think it's like the typical influencer behavior where you think, oh, I'm the main character. You know, I'm not the main character. I just happen to go down this path.
Why?
Because I'm not. Like, there are so many people in the world that do so many important things that get no recognition. Like doctors, nurses, firemen. I mean, a couple of them died recently at Silverstone, and they get a post on Facebook about it. You know, and how sad is that? And then meanwhile, here's me. I live a comfy life now. You know, I've got loads of silly cars that I don't need. I live in a house that I don't need. I could literally live in a shed. I've proved it. You know, and people I think, wrongly put people of, I don't know, renown on a pedestal. They shouldn't do that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm always glad to hear. I'll get messages on Instagram all the time saying like your race to mental health or something has really helped me identify that I've got a problem. I did something about it and my life's improved. Or people saying that you've given me the confidence to go for this engineering course I wanted to do. Those are the things that are most meaningful to me. I mean, like winning a race is great, but like it's nice to know I've had a positive effect somewhere. But I don't think that makes me better than anybody else or it raised me above anywhere else.
And that all started by
Mm.
uploading a video
Mm.
to YouTube, and it also developed in a shed. So I feel like the word shed here is
Yeah.
quite important in your journey. How did you find yourself with the setup that you had
Mm.
in that shed? At what point did you leave it in terms of like maybe put it to subscribers in that in like a number so we can picture when you left it? And how fast was the Wi-Fi connection?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I'll answer the first question first because I think people think the shed is where it all sort of began, and it didn't. There was stuff before that, you know, but the shed is where I guess people know me from. Um, but you know, the life up until then was difficult. You know, I grew up as the oldest of three boys, and my father, we left him when I was about 7. He was a pretty severe alcoholic and would like beat my mum and stuff like that. And then we jumped between houses basically for a long time. And my mum, I love her dearly. She has no idea what a good man is, bless her. So second stepdad, same sort of thing. Well, first stepdad, same sort of thing. You know, abusive and all that. And I'm about 11 years old now and growing up with this horrible figure. And then we move away again from all my friends somewhere else, into a small village. Next stepdad, again, abusive. And that was basically my entire life up until I was about 16, 17 years old, being like pushed around, beaten up, degraded, all this stuff. Because I was a pretty scrawny boy. I'm not a very like masculine man, you know, and I don't really care about that now. I'm quite proud of who I am now. But back then I didn't play football. I wasn't very strong, bit of a dweeb, you know, the sort of kid that probably gets pushed around a little bit. And that the reason why I give context to those things, and also sorry to add in, I will make sure the story is complete. When I was 13, my father ended up taking his own life, and so he was gone completely. And so any sort of big male figure in our life just has always been terrible. So I'm not a big fan of men.
So you became the main character.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But for my family, for sure, like I had to be, as the oldest boy, my mum would confide in me a lot about things maybe she shouldn't have confided in, you know. Childhood wasn't very long.
You mentioned that when the next like horrendous thing happened on your timeline
Yeah.
in your life, which was breaking up with your first partner, kind of going into a spiral after that, because of those traumatic experiences as a teen, is it quite hard not to kind of think about that when you go into like a dark place as like an option?
Well, you know,
Because it's been something in your life.
yeah, I mean, I think that like for a long time, and it is a difficult subject to talk about, but for a long time, I thought like I was fated, even though I don't believe in fate, but it's weird how your brain works, isn't it? Fated to follow that, to become someone who also then like let his life go to shit and then off himself. I thought it was, and then when I was in that really dark phase, I tried to do that, you know, and I'm glad it didn't work because it's so easy.
We all are.
Yeah, it's so easy when you're in this sort of fucking pit of despair. You don't see the top of it. You just see the bottom of the pit where you are. You don't see the way out. And it is there. It's just dark that day, you know. And
We talk about social media having such a negative influence on all of the things that we just mentioned there for like many corners of the world. And in a lot of circumstances, I'm sure it actually has done. Do you think that the audience that you grew, the friends you made, and the experience you had, and the gains in confidence of winning stuff and beating and getting better, did that save you?
that's interesting. I think, you know, I always dislike the broad statements of X saved my life because I think that like it's always
Tiny things.
yeah, it's either a tiny thing and it also maybe sometimes discredits the work that the individual's done to get to that point, you know. An example would be where someone says, "Oh, Jimmy, like I've got this YouTube channel, it's got 50K subscribers. I started it because of you. Thank you for helping me do that." And I was like, "Well, you're discrediting the fact of all that work you've put in to do that yourself. I mean, I'm happy that I gave you that initial maybe inspiration, but I didn't make 50K subscribe to you. You did that. you know. And I think that what saved me was this. I just wanted to be better. I had this need to be better. I never wanted to be upset or depressed. No one does, you know, but like, I think it's really easy to let yourself sit in it and think this is what my life is now. I thought, no, it's not. Like, why is this? Why am I going through this? I don't deserve this. And like, I have these moments of clarity where I feel like all these things that have happened to me have not been my fault. Like, I can't let myself punish myself for things that I didn't do to myself, you know. And sim racing was definitely instrumental in like the distraction factor or having something positive happen. 'Cause I've said it before, but sim racing and racing itself is like, how can I say this? You get yourself an actual tangible result at the end. Like, okay, so I've done this race out of 10 people. I finished first. I was the best. I did well here. I can be proud of this result, you know? I mean, albeit it does have the other side if you come 10th and you're like, oh shit.
Oh no, this is a spiral.
It's over, yeah. But I did that, you know, I would go with my friends and we'd do races together, and you know, I'd aim for, you know, let's try and get in the podium. Oh, I got second. I did better than I thought I would do. Nice, good job, you know. And it's just, I think what I'm trying to say is allowing myself those little victories was really important, because I think when you're really in a hole, nothing is okay, nothing is good, and you could literally, I don't know, win some sort of huge competition and not care about it if you're depressed. But also, you need to allow yourself those little moments. You know, got to be kind to yourself.
And there's also many other situations that come up that you don't expect to be as scary as they actually are sometimes. And I think when you were also thrown at the pace you were from the work that you did into other experiences, you mentioned you've just come back from a weekend of commentating and being in London with
Gran Turismo,
with Gran
doing
Turismo
that stuff there, yeah.
Like that whole world of commentary and speaking in front of people and there being audiences, that must have been quite scary, right? From the person that you're explaining.
Dude, I remember the first times in 2019, like, okay, Jimmy, you're going on camera this year. Like, what? Me? You're like, yeah, you'll be fine. Anyway, here you go. And they don't really give you time to worry about it. And you can watch, I mean, I'm not sure people are very interested in seeing this, but if you went back and typed in 2019, Paris, Gran Turismo, you will see my first time on camera next to Jules and Tom, and looking absolutely terrified, because I was. But then I wouldn't have done that if they had not pushed me into it. Does that make sense? So, and I think sometimes you need a push from people to do things that you're a bit nervous for, because then the time after that I did it slightly better, and then slightly better, and now I consider myself like a full-blown presenter. But I went from being, you know, a kid with a speech problems and social anxiety to being a fucking presenter, like,
and a racing car driver.
This is the worst possible job I can imagine as a kid. You know what I mean?
So at what point in your channel did you kind of leave the shed?
So in terms of subscribers, where was it? It's around 600 or 700k, around there. So
What?
a long time around. So I mean, in terms of progression, so COVID, like it was for a lot of people, it was either terrible or great. Terrible because, of course, like loss of life, family trauma, all those horrible things which we also experienced, unfortunately. But then also for sim racing, because it meant everyone was stuck at home, nowhere to go, no race circuits. The race circuits are now online. And I went from like 300k to 500k, I think it was in 4 months or something like that on YouTube, and then came out of COVID to about 700.
You must have been the richest person living in a shed in the world.
Maybe, I don't know. It was a pretty silly time, and there was a lot of very crazy things that happened in that. Like, for example, racing wheel to wheel with Lando Norris, and then him. I still maintain today he wrecked himself. All right, he crashed. He put himself over my nose and spun into a wall. But man, that opened me up to the wild world of F1 fans. I got death threats from that after that. You crashed into my favorite twink. I was like, yep, sorry about that.
Was that the first point in kind of your sim racing experience? You'd actually started to race the racing drivers, the Formula One drivers?
Well, it was sort of like around then, yeah. I mean, before then, I got invited into a couple of races with Team Redline, which at the time involved Lando, who was just before his first year in F1, and Max. A very intimidating grid to be on. especially when you do qualifying and you realize you're half a second off the back. You're like, oh, Jesus, this ain't going to go well for me.
There's not many people that have been in this van, only Misha, that have actually shared a track with Franz Hermann.
Ah, yes, the Franz Hermann.
And you are one of them. But do you remember your first race, like, against Max, or like even meeting in the virtual world for the first time?
Yeah, it was, I think either 2018 or 19. And it was driving F3 cars at the Montreal GP circuit, Canadian GP circuit. And it was that Team Redline event I mentioned. There's a guy called Atsa Kirkhoff. I think he's still involved with Team Redline in some way. Very fast sim driver, owns a very cool sim center as well. And he just said, Jimmy, you want to come along and race tonight? Make a video maybe if you fancy it? I'm like, yeah. And it was meant to be my night off. I try and give myself nights off. Well, I used to then. I was a bit of a workaholic at that point, but not so much nowadays. And I thought, yeah, okay, I'll do it. It'll be a good laugh, be good fun. And it turned out it was one of my most successful videos, so it was quite a good idea to do it. But Max, for some reason, started behind me. I forget why. And then made a mistake and spun at the hairpin. And, I don't care if he spun or not. That's still an overtake. So I went by, I'm like, I've overtaken Max Verstappen. Oh, my God. And then a couple of corners later, he just applies the pressure. And I folded lunging straight away. Because I was just a little sim baby then. But yeah, even in those little moments, like I don't know, this feels a little bit like mystical and odd. But I think that some drivers have like an aura around them, have like this feeling around them. Like, I guess it's like, Dale Earnhardt Sr., the Intimidator, right? He had that to him. Max is one of these people. Even in sim, you drive against him, it's coming, and you think, oh God, okay, what am I going to do? And you always drive differently as you would to anyone else.
Do you make more mistakes?
Yeah, 100%, because you're worried about the guy in your mirror. Even when you're like, I've driven against him in the DNLS series, which is a digital Nürburgring series, and he was in a class above me, so I'm not even racing him. And even when he comes to my relative, I think, oh God, I need to make sure I get out of the way properly here. But I genuinely believe that he is the greatest driver of all time. Like, and because racing drivers up until now have had only one discipline to be good in. It's F1 or whatever series. He is good at everything. You put him in a sim, he'll be in the top 1%. And any sim, all sims are a bit different, like different flavors, And he's consistently the fastest in everything. I think he's one of the fastest iRacers on the planet, which is super impressive if you're a sim guy. Again, I think that's a harder achievement than being a fast racing driver. And it's not because like he feels the need to do it, because he wants to do it. He's like wired to do those things, and it's just I find that very like impressive to see. Like I'm impressed by Max Verstappen. The rest of the drivers on the grid in F1, for example, not taken away, they're all very fast and very fast in sim as well, but they're not Max. Max has that extra 2%, and it really separates him, I think.
It's funny how in all sports there's like someone comes along and their aura and their achievements and all the rest of it just makes such a difference to the person they are, and then how the people around them behave. Like even in darts at the minute, look what's going on with like the rise of Luke Littler. For years, I'm sure that's how snooker players would have felt playing Ronnie O'Sullivan. Like, oh God,
here he comes,
like if I just give him one shot, he's going to go for it. But that's like leaving the door open for Max, isn't it? He's just going to go for a gap that like barely exists and lunge you.
He's definitely controversial. There are a lot of moves he's made where I've been like, oh, I don't know about that one. But like the most recent one with Russell, the Spanish Grand Prix. I was watching that and I just laughed when I saw. I'm like, yep, that's Max right there, because he wants it. He's a scrapper. He'll take, as you say, every chance he'll take. He'll just take it, whether it's on or not. He'll just have an opportunity. Rather have a go and then it maybe work than not have a go at all,
No, we know Max is literally all about the racing and he puts racing in front of everything, but he actually participated in an event that meant a lot to you, right? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, so we run an event called the Race of Mental Health, and I think we had our 6th year of it last year, so going for 6 years. And the whole idea is to raise money for Mind, a mental health charity, because as I've spoken about today, I had my own challenges for a while, and a lot of people do. and I think a lot of people don't talk about them. So it's a good thing to go, maybe a little instigator for people to realize that it's okay to talk about these things. And not the race that just went, but the year before, Max basically stealth entered with his team. We had no idea he was coming until I was on the circuit and saw Max Verstappen. Oh, and he was in the car that I knew he would drive. He was with his team basically, and he came in, donated a ton of money, and raced, had fun, and then left.
How much money did he donate, Jimmy?
Well, I mean, like I think it's been over 5 figures when he's donated each time, something like that. But and then this year, I sent a message and said, "Do you mind if I just I know you're doing it. Do you mind if I say you're doing it? Because it's going to help bring people in." And I wouldn't usually. I think it must be so tough having such a profile that you can't just turn up and do something you want to do. So I thought I'll give you the option. I'm not going to do it without your permission. He said yes, which is good for us, so we could sort of advertise the event more. And it turned out being our biggest event in terms of money that we've ever raised. I think it was just shy of 100k we raised last year. And again, Max donated about over 10k, I think, through the penalty system. What took part in it was a good sport, and I mean, he's just a guy that loves racing. And I think that event especially, because the race of mental health is basically a bit of a shit show. And we design it that way, where we have lots of different classes of cars that are completely mismatched. So you'll have someone in, I don't know, an old prototype versus some lad in the GR86 trying to survive and getting around. And the circuit is Zolder, a small Belgian circuit. So terrible for multi-class, yet we have 5 different classes. And you can buy penalties for other teams. So you can go, right, okay, this guy's ahead of me. I'm going to buy him 5 stop goes. That's £100. And what? And everyone knows this. Everyone knows. So
Max must have been raging.
Well, this is what happened. We went over it at the end. And I think they had something like 150 drive-through penalties bought for them over the course of the race at 15, 20 quid a pop. And they also then bought. So there's this hilarious scenario. It's the most Max thing I can think about, where there was an incident on the circuit. And also, to give you more context, incidents are also, if you do something stupid, you have an option either to pay off the race control, FIA style, or you can go into the pits and sing your national anthem or do a dad joke, something like that. Something fun. And so Max got into an incident with a slower car where we deemed him to be at fault. He was a bit too fast going in and just punted the guy.
Were you judging rather than
No,
racing?
I was driving. We have a very, very lovely race control team who do all the really hard bits. Oscar and Ash and there's others as well. They're all great part of the event. And he did this, and so he then got given a drive-through penalty, which he then paid off. But then, in typical Max fashion, he went, "You know what? Fuck these guys," and then bought 10 drive-through penalties for the person he hit. And it's like, right, you know what? If I have to do it, you've got to do it too. And then sat him in the pit lane for a minute, and just out of pure vindictiveness. But that's what the event's all about. And like I said, we've been doing 6 years now. I think we've raised over 320 grand total over the 6 years.
Is that one of the favourite races you do?
It's one of my favorite races, and it's the event that I do that means the most to me. I mean, I'm very fortunate to be able to. I've taken part in the N24, where I will do so again this year. I've won championships here in the UK, but that is the most important thing, and the thing that I take the most pride in is seeing that event succeed.
And I don't think there's very little people that can say they have raced Max so much and got to see the inner workings of his personality as clearly as you on a sim, which we all know means the world to him, as well as actually on track as well. You were on track with Franz Hermann at the Nürburgring.
I mean,
what was that whole experience like? I asked Misha about it on the podcast previously, and we even put a clip live that went mad on the whole experience. Did you know before that happened?
Yeah, I mean, to say I was on track at the same time is technically correct, but that's about it. We had an idea that it was going to be there. I had sort of a friend of a friend saying to me "Hey, watch out for Franz Hermann on this day," and I saw it, and I saw a picture of the car there, the Verstappen.com Ferrari with Franz Hermann and a Dutch flag, and I thought to myself, fuck's sake, like it's definitely going to be him. And obviously it turns out it was him. And again, for Max, this is where I feel a bit sorry for the guy, because he wanted just to turn up and go do some laps at the ring in the GT3 car. And he did that. And for us as creators, and this is the part of like YouTube that I hate, but you kind of have to do it because that's the game. Then I'd be like, okay, I've got a shot of him overtaking me whilst I was like bedding in my drive shaft and driving around like 50% pace. He overtook me. Oh my God, Max overtook me on YouTube. And then like my whole video is like, Max turned up to the Nürburgring and stuff like that. And you have to do that. And it's kind of sad because the guy just wanted to be left alone, I think. And then as news started to break that he was there, more and more people start flooding down to the garage. It gets harder to move around in the paddock, stuff like that. And I remember seeing like, because one of our cameramen went down to like get a shot of him basically, and seeing him just try and get from his van, which is basically maybe the length of this van, to the paddock or to the garage. It's like not very far at all. And it's getting mobbed, TV guide, everything. He wants us to do some laps, you know. That's why I'm not sure if he was told he had to have a fake name or not. I've heard rumors that he was. And it would kind of make sense, I guess, because then that happens. But he turns up, drives some of the fastest laps that's ever been seen at the ring, and just leaves again.
And he'd only ever done 3 laps, was it, prior in real life of the ring?
I'm not sure about like his history there, but that's what I've heard. He's very little experience there. I know he's wanted to drive there a lot. I think Red Bull have sort of vetoed it a few times. But I think at the end of the day, if you're Max Verstappen, you've got 4 championships. You know, you are Red Bull at this point. Do what the fuck you want. He does. And I'm really looking forward, and I really hope this happens, that he will just find what he wants at F1, leave, and then just go and
we get to watch the rest.
Go and get to live his life. Because I'm in no place to comment on what his upbringing was like. I don't know. You know, you only hear stories of what it was like. But what is painfully obvious, all he's ever known is like that sort of racing. Karting into Formula 1. That's it. On these circuits, nowhere else. I'm a massive racing fan. I wouldn't say Formula 1's my favorite racing. You know, I love endurance racing. I love the circuits, I love the prototypes, like all the different. I love rallying, stuff like that. And I think he's kind of the same. You know, I mean, again, I don't know him.
You love
really
all
personally.
forms of racing.
You just love it.
Even in your videos, one thing that I picked out, I made a note of it, is just how many steering wheels I've seen around the edge of your shot, because each one of those wheels does mean that there has either been an investment made or something given for that style of racing.
Exactly.
You know, if it's like the wooden Ferrari wheel or a Formula 1 wheel or a GT wheel, like all of them serve a different purpose, and each one of those steering wheels has hours of time and learning and energy and everything gone into it. And I kind of feel like they're a bit of a visual reference point into just how many styles of racing a true racer really loves.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you rob yourself as a motorsport fan if you just watch one discipline, because there's so much variety out there, and you don't know if you're going to like it unless you watch. It's like food. You got to try it to see if you like it, you know.
Where does rallying sit for you? Is that like a different breed as well?
I mean, rallying for me is like, it's up there with like the skill required to drive an F1 car fast, you know. I think those guys are just fucking insane. Like, I don't understand how you can have a car at 30, 40 degrees at 160 Ks, pointing at trees, sliding through it, and then just bring it back easily. I mean, I've driven off-road. I've done some dirt stuff before on the rear-wheel drive car, and I was like fighting for my life, and I was terrified of the thing. And then the instructor gets in like it's nothing and just puts it in places and then puts it at angles that I don't even understand.
And you're in the passenger seat going, no!
I'm waiting for just the earth-shattering kaboom. You know, it's coming. But through accessibility, or maybe through just lack of marketing, stuff like rallying, it's like falling away a bit. And it's a shame, because we have Le Mans coming up, which I think is, alongside the N24, they're the 2 greatest races in the world. And it will get nowhere near the attention than like the Miami GP would get. You know what I mean?
But when you look at where sim racing was, for example, when you first started to blow up versus like where it is now and how serious it's taken and the money that's kind of involved and the following and all the rest of it, do you think it's coming for those other series? And do you think Max is actually potentially a part, if he does leave and goes to them, of making that a thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, wherever Max goes, there'll be media, you know? So, I mean, there have been some teams at the ring saying like they don't want Max to go there because it will make everything a lot harder. The competition will go up, which means that the top classes will be top heavy, which means the bottom classes, which is the accessible part, will be sort of pushed out, etc., etc. Classic sort of what's the word? Pessimistic thinking there. But sim racing now is huge, like compared to what it was when I started. You know, I mean, direct drive wheels, which are the wheels that we all use now, really, have become kind of the norm. When I started, a direct drive wheel was like $6,000, and now you can buy one for 300 quid. You know, albeit not quite as powerful as the $6,000 one, but still you can have one. And
So not only is there more people, the cost to entry's gone down.
yeah, cost of entry's gone down. I mean, I say that you can Joe Rogan it and get these guys to build you a crazy rig and not really have all these ancillaries you don't need, or you can have a very purposeful rig. I mean, like I co-own a company called Abruzzi, and we are sort of resellers and also provide sim rigs for companies, stuff like that, for events. We also hold events at our showroom, and one of our big kind of points of the business is like, that's not, things don't need bells and whistles to be good. We can put them on there if you want them, but we make a point of being like, right, okay, here is the thing that will do the job and do it well, and here is a competitive price for it, as opposed to, well, you could have a butt kicker and you could have motion that's going to make it worse for you, or you could have this fan that simulates wind on there that you will never feel in a real car.
Because one of your biggest videos is like try an $8 million simulator. It could have been even more than that. Like,
I'm aware of the irony there. Yeah.
But can you go much quicker?
No.
Or is it just closer to the experience of real life?
I think it's like closer to the experience. It's filling in those gaps I mentioned earlier about like, vibration and noise and immersion in the cockpit and having a helmet on, because they all affect your performance, you know, in some small way. That rig, for example, is more about being able to output meaningful data to BMW to understand what's going on in the car and maybe apply changes to the car that they can then give a go in real life. But the story I always tell is I have a long-suffering teammate. His name is Stephen Bailey. He's a lovely, lovely boy. And for a long time, he used to race on a non-force feedback Cytec wheel, which has 180 degrees of rotation only. So that's 90 to the left, 90 to the right, and pedals with no feeling, just up and down like that. And he beat me. He would beat me on my fancy setup because he just had the feel for the game. And that's the example I give when someone says, well, if I get a direct drive wheel and this crazy $5,000 active pedal, will it make me faster? I'm like, well, no, probably not. That comes from you. The most important part of the race car is that meaty, fleshy bit between the seat and the wheel.
Which, if someone then disrupts that most important part by cheating, how does that make you feel? Because you must have seen this throughout the years. Like, there must be so many competitive advantages you can have with code in what you do. And how frustrating is it? And is it a big problem?
There's a lot of very, very good anti-cheat software out there. I have raced against cheaters before, and it's kind of obvious because you come out of a corner and they'll gap you by like 5 car lengths. And you're like, how have you done that in a car that's exactly the same as mine? But I just think it's like going to the gym and taking it easy. Just cheat yourself. Not cheating anyone else, you know. I mean, like, you've won that event, and in big events, these guys always get found out. There's never. I mean, actually, there was a big scandal recently about Team Redline. They all got disqualified from the N24 because they used an exploit where you start in the pit lane and you put on wet tires, which increases your ride height by something like 20 mil, which allows you to then, when you switch to dry tires, have a lower than legal ride height for the race. So someone worked this out. And all the red line cars went, yeah, okay, we're going to do that. And then, but the reason why they were caught out is because they qualified first and second on the grid and then started from the pits. You're like, why have you done that? It was to then use this exploit or use this. I say exploit. It was in the game, and it's still sort of like up in the air whether that
They found a competitive advantage or not.
Yeah, exactly. But iRacing has some sort of quite vague sporting code, which they can just pull from that and go, okay. And I think they were basically given the chance that you can either do this race and get disqualified, or you can quit, and we won't take it any further. So after a few hours, all the red line cars pulled into the pits and just left the race. But is that cheating or not? That is the question. And it's like saying you're a racetrack, and if you're not reported for track limits, is that cheating? Even though you've gone over track limits, you know.
What's it like for you that all those hours of iRacing and racing against cheaters and non-cheaters and greats and non-greats and Verstappens and all the rest of it has put together what you wanted when you're at one of your lower spirals? You've got the house, you've got the girlfriend, you've got the kid, and outside you've got quite the selection of cars. Some are growing more greenery than others.
Yeah, there is a very green.
Do you ever think about that? Do you ever think about like the fruits of your labour?
Sometimes, like not in the way of like, look what I have, haha. It's more just like, how do these things exist? You know, how has it come to this? You know, for me, being able to go to bed at night, you know, in a house next to my my beautiful partner and, you know, our child, my son Guy, it's like it's a, I hate the word because I'm not really religious, but it's blessing it every night. You know, I'm like, oh my god, I have this. How's this happened? This seems so unattainable, and like the wildest of wildest dreams. You know, and of course, don't get me wrong, the racing is amazing, and from the personal level, that's great, and I'm really amazed that I've had that chance to do that. I feel privileged every time I do it, and I'm always aware of that privilege that comes with doing these things. You know, because I have not had them, and they were a point where they were not available, and now they are available. I think it all comes down to something my friend said to me once, and I think it's just like paraphrasing something else, but it was just saying that everything in this world is transient. Everything moves all the time. Everything changes. You know, the worst day of your life. After that comes maybe the second worst day of your life, and then the third, and then the fourth. You know, and it gets better from there. I think that it's always worth trying, no matter how hard it is in the moment, to understand that the thing you're going through in that complete second is not going to be forever. It might be for even for a couple of years. It won't be forever. It can't be forever. And whenever I am confronted with a question like that, I think, well, I just very, very slowly made my way out. And if I can do it, you know, I think anyone can, because I know how ill I was, and that's not to ever discredit anyone else. We all go through different challenges, but I think that even doing the first bit of just getting out of being sad or finding ways to deal with being sad, that's a huge achievement, and people should be like proud of those things. And there are people who lust after, you know, items and things and think that is achievement, and it is. Don't get me wrong, like, I love having these cars. I'm a massive petrol head, so I'm like, yeah, I've got these cars, I love them, but I would give them up in a heartbeat if it just meant more time with like my family or something like that. You know, they're just things.
What are those things currently?
Oh yeah, right, okay. After this nice impassioned speech about things not mattering,
let's break him.
Let's talk about the things. So, I mean, I own a few cars, cars that I've had for a while. I mean, the first one and my jewel in the crown of my little collection would be the R32,
which
GTR.
I knew you were going to say, and the reason I wanted you to say it is because I wanted to show that does have meaning, because you did finish that big impactful part, but one of those cars for sure, when you get to second, third, fifth, has more meaning than the others. It has a sentimental value, and I knew you were going to pick that one out. And you did a video with Drive Tribe where you actually showed that car and that shed where it all began in. So would that be the last one to go?
Yeah, probably. That and maybe my little crazy MX-5 thing that we built over the years, because that was the first car I ever bought that I liked in 2014, and it turned into a big time attack car. But for the Skyline, you know, the history of it as well, like it belonged before me to Jan Mardenborough, I bought it from him directly, and he is also someone who went from being a gamer or a sim guy to being a very accomplished racing driver, and that car almost has that spirit to it, you know. And for me as well, to get into it, the the game that really pushed my passion forward as a car fan, and for a lot of people, was the original Gran Turismo and Gran Turismo 2. And one of the first cars you can buy in that game with your 10k budget is a Skyline. And I bought a Skyline in that color, and sometimes things do line up. Again, we've talked about fate a couple of times. I don't like to.
The amount of correlations in your journey between you doing something in, I almost think it's a bit mean to discredit it as the virtual world, because although it is online, this stuff is serious. Like the races, the rewards, the competitiveness, the challenges, the difficulty, the skill level is so up there that, and it's definitely growing year on year. The respect is what I'm saying is growing for that world. But so many things that you've done in that world have actually gone the other way into real life, whether it be buying the Skyline, whether it be transitioning from sim racing to real racing. But as you said a minute ago, you would give the cars up for more time. Would you give up sim racing for real racing?
Yes, straight away. There is just nothing like it, you know. I mean, I have spent so many years loving sim racing and being part of it, but the reason I did it is because I couldn't do real racing, and it scratched that itch, you know. I mean, we had this sort of saying on my channel where it's the cars aren't real, but the racing is, because it completely is. There are moves I've used in sim that I've then used in real life, you know, and stuff like that. But nothing can replace being in a real race car, having that adrenaline, that movement, that feeling of like, okay, especially in the older cars, like I am in a machine. I am like operating this machine. And it's up to me to operate it at peak efficiency. And there's a little place your mind goes to in those moments where it's very calm and you feel on your own. There's no one else around. It's just you're just carrying out a task that you know how to do well. And those points that's what I chase as a driver, is being on my own in that moment and knowing that I'm just fucking killing it, you know. And it's hard to have that in a sim because there are so many little distractions. Like a screen is only a screen, you know, you can see beyond it. A VR headset, you know you're wearing a box in your head, you know, there's no pressure to perform. There's no
tap out a lot easier.
Yeah, there's no consequence if you mess up. And it comes back to saying there's no reset button, I guess, after saying that earlier on. But that's kind of it.
Even though there's no reset button, I think this podcast is proof that if you are at your hardest times, there actually is a reset button. So, Jimmy, thank you so much for joining me in the back of my very warm van studio. Last time you're probably in something this warm and this combined, it would have been that shed where a lot of this first started. I appreciate you so much, as do the audience listening to this, for telling your story, because it is the epitome of why I started Road to Success. It's to genuinely help people and make them realise that people like you do exist. You should be there for them as an inspiration and an icon, because all the things you've done are amazing. So thank you so much for joining me in the back of the van. And I look forward to seeing where your journey goes, and I will thank you very shortly when you hit 1 million subscribers on YouTube. So, Jimmy, thank you so much.
You, mate. Appreciate it.